Elias Thornwood knelt at the edge of his cornfield, once green and full of promise, now reduced to brittle stalks that crumbled between his weathered fingers. The drought had stretched into its third month, and the land had given up. His boots sank slightly into cracked earth as wide as wagon tracks, splitting the soil in jagged lines like a broken mirror. The sun hung high and cruel, hammering down on his shoulders as he rose, brushing dry husks from his pants. In his mind, he counted again. 2 days' worth of water left in the barrel, 1 sack of cornmeal in the pantry. Enough for 1 last meal, maybe 2. He was measuring his death in spoonfuls. The walk back to the cabin felt heavier each day. The wooden frame had sheltered 3 generations of Thornwoods. His father had carved those beams by hand. His mother had sewn the curtains still clinging to the windows. His wife had painted flowers on the kitchen door before the fever took her 2 winters ago. Now the paint peeled in long, curling strips. The roof leaked when it did rain, which was rare, and the walls sagged like they, too, had grown tired of waiting. Elias carried the silence with him like a second skin, until he saw it. Near the old oak at the far edge of his property, something dark lay crumpled in the dirt. His eyes narrowed against the glare. A shadow, a wounded animal. His hand went to the rifle slung across his back as he stepped cautiously off the path. Wild creatures had been stumbling out of the hills lately, driven mad by thirst, some willing to attack. But this wasn't an animal. As Elias drew closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a boy, maybe 16, no older. Long black hair matted with sweat and dust, bronze skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones, ribs showing through a torn shirt like a xylophone. Apache. The boy's lips were cracked white, chest barely rising with each shallow breath. Every instinct Elias had, the ones taught by bitter stories and blood-soaked warnings, told him to turn back. Apache raids had swept through settlements just 50 miles south last month. Families murdered in their sleep, homes burned to ash. Posters still hung in town. Any Apache found on settler land is considered hostile and may be shot on sight. But this boy wasn't a warrior. He was starving, dying. Elias knelt beside him, lowered his ear to the boy's lips. There was breath. Faint, but there. The boy's eyelids fluttered open for a heartbeat, unfocused and shimmering with desperation. Then closed again. Elias looked back toward his cabin, then down again at the boy lying broken in the dirt. He hesitated, long enough to hear the voice in his head. If you help him, and they find out, they'll kill you too. But something deeper spoke louder. He slid his arms beneath the boy's shoulders and knees, surprised by how little he weighed. Bones and skin, that's all he was. As Elias lifted him, the boy's head lolled against his chest. Each step toward the cabin felt like betrayal. Of logic, of survival, of everything the frontier had hammered into him about enemies and bloodlines. But inside his chest, the slow-burning ember of conscience refused to die. At the doorway he paused, looked once more at the field of brittle stalks behind him, and stepped into the shadows with the boy cradled in his arms. The cabin swallowed them both. Elias had barely finished laying the boy on his own bed when something outside shifted, subtle at first, like the stillness before lightning. A low hum began to rise over the horizon. He stepped onto the porch, hand shielding his eyes from the relentless sun, and saw it. Dust clouds in the distance, too wide and too steady to be wind. Hooves, multiple riders, fast. They followed the old trading path that cut through the valley straight toward his property. His stomach turned. Riders like that only meant 3 things in this territory: a militia patrol, an outlaw gang, or worse, lawmen on the hunt. And if they found the Apache boy under his roof, there'd be no time for explanations. He rushed back inside. The boy, still barely conscious, tried to sit up. "Don't," Elias said quickly. You need to hide. Now. The young Apache braced himself against the wall, swaying. How many? He whispered hoarsely. Elias looked out again. 6, maybe 8. Moving fast. He grabbed the rifle from above the fireplace, 3 bullets in the chamber. Nowhere near enough. The root cellar was too obvious, under the bed even worse. Then his eyes went to the loft, the small crawl space above the main room used for storing broken tools and old traps. Up there, he said. Climb. Stay quiet. No matter what you hear. The boy moved slowly, each rung of the ladder testing what little strength he had left. As his form disappeared into the shadows above, the hoofbeats reached the front yard. Dust churned, boots hit dirt. 8 mounted men formed a rough semicircle in front of the porch, rifles and revolvers gleaming under the sun. Their leader, a thick-set man with a grizzled beard and a territorial marshal's badge pinned to his vest, spat tobacco juice onto the dry grass. "Afternoon, Thornwood," he said. "Name's Marshal Grayson. We're tracking Apache raiders. Hit the Miller place yesterday. Killed the whole family. Burned the farm to the ground." Elias's face stayed neutral, but ice spread in his gut. "I've been out in my fields all morning. Haven't seen anything." Grayson glanced past him at the brittle corn stalks, then at the peeling cabin. "Heard you've been struggling since your wife passed," he said. "Man gets desperate, might make foolish choices about who he lets onto his land." "Not sure what you're implying," Elias replied evenly. Another rider, young, eyes twitchy, pointed toward the old oak. "Marshal, there's disturbed ground near that tree, like someone was lying there." Elias's mouth went dry. Of course the earth would still show it, the boy's collapsed form, the cracked lips that had bled on the dirt. Grayson dismounted, boots crunching. He knelt at the tree, pressed his fingers into the dust. "Fresh," he muttered, "within the last few hours." Then he turned to Elias. "You want to tell me what happened here?" Elias felt the grip on his rifle tighten as the riders began to spread out. "Could have been anything," he said, forcing calm. "Coyote. Stray dog. Maybe someone passing through." "What kind of someone?" Grayson asked, stepping onto the porch. From inside the cabin came the faintest sound, a floorboard creaking overhead. The marshal's eyes flicked up. One of the deputies, already near the ladder, narrowed his gaze. "What's up there?" Elias hesitated, sweat beading on his brow. "Just storage," he said. "Old tools, traps, nothing of use." Grayson nodded once. "We'll take a look, just to be thorough." As one of the deputies put a boot on the bottom rung, Elias felt the moment slipping out of his hands. Seconds now, maybe less. The deputy climbed 2 rungs, then froze. Another floorboard groaned above. His hand went to the revolver on his hip. "Something's moving up there," he said. "I heard it." Without warning, the deputy drew and fired, one loud, sharp shot into the wooden ceiling. The bullet ripped through the boards just inches from where Ayanna lay curled, splintering wood and sending a cloud of dust raining down. Upstairs, there was a sudden thump. Ayanna had flinched hard and nearly rolled into view. Elias didn't think. He shoved past the marshal, planted himself under the ladder. "That's enough," he roared. "You're firing blind in my home." The deputy stepped back, startled, but Grayson's hand had already gone to his pistol. "What are you hiding, Thornwood?" Grayson barked. "That shot should have brought something down if there was nothing up there." Elias met his gaze squarely, standing tall despite the danger. "You want to know what's up there?" he said. "Dust, broken saw blades, a family Bible. You fire another round and you'll put a hole through my roof for no damn reason." The other deputies were tense now, hands hovering near weapons, eyes darting to windows. Then, without warning, the sound changed outside. It was subtle at first, a low rhythm, like breath rising from the canyon floor. Then louder, chanting. Not words, but something primal and deep. From every direction at once. The deputy on the ladder froze mid-step. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. Grayson turned sharply, stepping back onto the porch, eyes scanning the land. And then he saw them. Shadows, hundreds of them, moving like flowing water down hills, rising from gullies and brush where nothing had seemed to exist moments before. Apache warriors, not charging, not shouting, just appearing. Sitting horses in complete stillness, forming a circle so vast it swallowed the valley. "How many?" someone whispered. 200, Grayson said, voice dry. "Maybe more. Jesus Christ." Behind him, Elias stepped into the doorway, the rifle lowered but firm in his hands. "You still want to go up that ladder, Marshal?" Out of the silence, one figure began to move. An older Apache man rode slowly from the ranks, his horse picking its way through the brittle grass like it remembered better seasons. He wore traditional leathers and a long necklace of carved bone, but there was no war paint, no weapon drawn. Authority radiated from his posture, not just the authority of leadership, but of memory, of history, of someone who had outlived fire and famine and had no interest in wasting breath. Behind him, 2 younger riders followed, holsters strapped but untouched. The elder stopped 20 feet from the porch and looked directly at Elias. His voice was low, but it carried effortlessly. "You are the one," he said, "the one who feeds the hungry." Grayson stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Stay back, old man. This is territorial law you're interfering with." The elder turned his eyes toward the marshal, dark, steady, unreadable, and gave the faintest trace of a smile. "Your law," he said. Then, with a slow sweep of his arm, he gestured to the hundreds surrounding them. "Our land." Grayson bristled. "This is sovereign United States territory." The old man didn't flinch. "This," he said, "is where my grandson lay dying this morning." The words hit Elias like a hammer to the chest. Grandson, Ayana. Above them, the ceiling creaked again. This time, everyone heard it. "There's someone up there," one of the deputies shouted. He raised his rifle. "Deputy," Grayson began, but the elder raised one hand. "No," he said simply, and the entire valley stilled. Not a single Apache moved, yet the weight of their presence pressed down like a storm about to break. "You will not harm the one who showed mercy," the old man said. "You will not enter the sacred place where kindness was given." "Sacred?" Grayson scoffed, but his voice cracked. "This is a dirt cabin, nothing more." The elder's eyes never left him. "This morning my grandson was dying. This man gave him water when he had none, gave him food when he had less, gave him shelter when he had every reason not to. That makes this place sacred to my people." Around them, the Apache riders remained still, but no one could mistake their readiness. "You are protecting him?" Grayson asked. "He may be harboring raiders." The old man did not raise his voice. "He is harboring my family." Grayson's jaw clenched, but something behind his eyes shifted. For the first time, he looked not at Elias or the warriors, but at the cabin itself, the sagging roof, the dry fields, the man standing alone in front of it all. His grip on his pistol loosened. "My daughter," he muttered suddenly, not to anyone in particular. "She died 2 winters ago. We had no food left. Cold came early. By the time I rode into town with enough furs to trade, it was too late. She was 6. No one spoke. Grayson blinked hard, as if angry at his own words. "I blamed the Apache. I blamed the drought. I blamed everyone but the truth, that we were starving, and no one came." His gaze lifted toward Elias. "You think this will change anything?" Takakota's voice came gently, like wind through canyon rock. "There is water beneath this land," he said. "Deep water. More than enough to feed your crops and ours." Elias looked up, surprised. Here, the elder nodded. Your wells failed because you dug where white men think water should be. But the earth speaks in older tongues. My people have known this land for 1,000 seasons. We know where it hides its gifts. Ayana's voice, steady now, came from the loft above. He speaks the truth. I learned to find water when I could barely walk. It's there. We can show you. And in return, Elias asked, though he already knew, my people will help you dig the wells, plant the fields, harvest the food. What we grow, we share. This land sustains us both, or it sustains no one. Takakota's eyes gleamed not with plea, but with conviction. You hold the legal deed, we hold the knowledge. Together, something new can grow. Grayson stepped back like he'd been struck. Absolutely not. This is treason. An alliance with enemies of the territory is punishable by death. The word enemies hit the air like flint against steel. Murmurs rose among the Apache, hands shifted near weapons. Tension bloomed again, sharp and immediate. The elder's voice turned to ice. Enemies, he repeated. Who burned our crops? Who poisoned our wells? Who placed bounties on our scalps like we were animals? Grayson stood silent, jaw tightening. You call us savages. Takakota stepped forward. And yet we speak of farming, of feeding children, of life, while you speak of law and punishment. Then Ayana's voice came again, clear and unwavering. There is another choice. He descended the ladder slowly, weak but upright, and walked to Elias's side. My grandfather offers peace, a chance for both peoples to live through the winter, or you can continue this war and see where it leads. Grayson's deputies glanced nervously toward the horizon, where 200 warriors still waited. No one moved. The entire valley held its breath. As twilight settled over the valley, the impossible happened. The circle of Apache riders began to shift, not tightening for an assault, but loosening, relaxing, transforming. Horses were dismounted, packs unstrapped, cooking fires lit. Not war camps, family fires. Children emerged from the distant edges, running barefoot between saddlebags. Elders rode in on travois pulled by gentle mares. An Apache woman approached Elias, her silver-streaked hair braided with beads. She carried a bundle of blankets and something that smelled rich with spice. She looked him over, eyes narrowing in that sharp, appraising way only grandmothers possess. She spoke rapidly in Apache, and Takakota chuckled. My wife, he said, Ayana's grandmother. She says you're too thin. She intends to fix that. Elias blinked, caught between awe and disbelief. Tell her I'd be honored. While others unpacked baskets of jerky, dried squash, and cornmeal cakes, Takakota led Elias to the rear of the property. They stood at a slight slope where the grass looked no different than anywhere else. Here, the elder said. He knelt, pressed his ear to the earth, then sifted a handful of dust through his fingers. 20 feet down, maybe 25, a river sleeping beneath the skin of this land, more water than you could use in 10 lifetimes. Elias stared at the ground. How can you possibly know? Takakota didn't answer with science. The earth speaks to those who listen, he said simply. Behind them, warriors were already unloading tools, shovels, picks, buckets. Ready not to raid, but to dig. More Apache families arrived, some walking beside horses, others guiding elders, some carrying seed corn wrapped in cloth like precious treasure. One group had even brought live chickens. Elias stood by the porch, watching the transformation unfold with quiet amazement. No one gave orders. Everyone simply moved with purpose. That's when he noticed the Johnson family from the next farm over. Mr. Johnson nodded awkwardly as he helped unload a spade. Mrs. Johnson approached, hands coated in soil. Mr. Thornwood, she said softly, I hope you don't mind. We heard about the well. Our crops failed, too, and these Apache folks, they're showing us things I've never seen." An Apache woman nearby looked up and smiled, then said something in her language. Takakota translated, "She says Mrs. Johnson has good hands. The plants will listen to her." Later that evening, as the fires burned low and children dozed beside their parents, Elias sat near the edge of the cabin with a bowl of stew balanced in his hands. Laughter rippled across the yard, from Apache and white alike. Ayana sat across from him, eyes reflecting firelight. "Tomorrow we dig," he said, "and if we plant fast, we can still save something this season." Elias glanced toward the stars. "And next season?" Ayana smiled. "We plant for the next year and the one after that. Grandfather says this land can feed 100 families, Apache and settler, if we care for it together." Elias took a long breath, then chuckled, light, real, surprised. "Your grandmother might feed me to death before that happens." Ayana grinned wide. "You should be so lucky." At dawn, Elias awoke to a sound he hadn't heard in years, rhythmic, purposeful, human. The thunk of shovels biting into earth, the low hum of coordination, and the occasional shout of encouragement. Outside, the dry field had transformed into a living organism, men digging in formation at the site Takakota had chosen, already 6 feet down, women working in long rows, hands moving with ancestral grace as they turned soil, measured spacing, and laid seeds with care. Children ran back and forth with water pails, giggling as they sloshed and splashed one another. And most incredibly, 3 white families were working right alongside them, not in fear, not in hesitation, but in hope. Elias moved to the edge of the well pit as a shout went up from below. The diggers had hit something, wet sand, then darkened clay, and then, finally, the sound changed. A gush of water burst upward, clear and cold, bubbling through their efforts like a miracle. Cheers erupted, not just from the Apache, but from white settlers, too. Mrs. Johnson cried openly as her son danced in muddy boots around the edge. Apache and settler children splashed together, indistinguishable in laughter and joy. Near the tree line, Ayana crouched with a small Apache girl and a freckled white boy. Together, they carefully packed soil around a single corn sprout. 2 small hands, one brown, one pale, patted the earth together. Throughout the morning, more families arrived. Some came cautiously, curious about rumors of water and cooperation. Others arrived with the weary urgency of hunger. Not all stayed. One older settler rode off at the sight of Apache families sharing food with whites. Some Apache riders, arriving from distant camps, hung back, watchful, unsure. But for every person who left, 2 others came. Pastor Green from the nearby township arrived with a cart of tools and a book of psalms. A midwife offered to help tend to elders and children. Quietly, without declaration, the beginnings of something unprecedented took root. A functioning community, built not on blood or treaty, but on shared necessity and fragile trust. Marshal Grayson returned just after noon, riding alone. This time, no rifle slung across his chest, no deputies in tow. He stopped at the edge of the field, dismounted, and stood for a long time, arms crossed, watching. Takakota approached without fear. "Well," he asked, "do you regret letting this begin?" Grayson didn't answer right away. He watched Mrs. Johnson laughing as she tried to carry 2 buckets at once, her skirt soaked. He saw Ayana teaching a settler boy how to tie a rope handle. He saw Elias leaning against a shovel, smiling at something Takakota's granddaughter had said. "I didn't say I'd let anything," Grayson muttered. "I just haven't stopped it. Yet." Then he turned and walked back to his horse, No threats, no report, just silence. And maybe permission. By late afternoon, the settlement pulsed with purpose. Apache farmers taught white settlers how to read the earth's language, how to test the texture of soil with bare hands, how to use shade and wind to judge planting time. Settler carpenters helped repair the sagging beams of Elias's barn. Children moved fluidly between languages, sharing games and chores with no regard for the lines that had once divided them. One group worked on rope irrigation systems, using both Apache braiding techniques and settler pulley rigs. Around every cooking fire, people shared not just meals, but stories, jokes, songs. It no longer felt like an experiment. It felt like something real. At the edge of the western field, where shadows began to lengthen and the breeze carried the scent of tilled earth, Elias stood beside Takakota, both silent, watching. A few feet in front of them, a small child knelt in the dirt. A little girl, her skin a soft blend of Apache bronze and settler pink, her braids tied with ribbon and string. With careful hands, she pressed a kernel of corn into the soil. She looked up at her father, an Apache man who nodded. Then up at her mother, a white woman who smiled through tears. The girl patted the earth, stood, and looked back at Elias and Takakota. Neither spoke, but both understood. This was no longer about saving a farm. This was about planting a future. Elias turned slightly toward Takakota, voice low and thoughtful. "If one well can water both peoples," he said, "then maybe, just maybe, we've been digging for the wrong thing all along." Takakota said nothing, but his hand rested on Elias's shoulder, firm, steady, a gesture of trust that needed no translation. Around them, the golden hour light spilled across the valley, brushing the cabins, the fields, and the hundreds of small fires beginning to glow again. As the sun dipped behind the ridge and the night wind began to rise, the camp prepared its evening meal. Smoke curled gently into the darkening sky. Laughter bubbled from both sides of the circle, Apache and settler, old and young, sharing the rhythm of survival. They ate together. No banners were raised, no declarations signed, just plates passed hand to hand, bowls refilled, and stories told under stars. Tomorrow the government might come. Tomorrow someone might try to stop this. But tonight, the land was quiet. Children fell asleep in laps that didn't match their skin. Elders murmured blessings in 2 languages. And in the place where fear once ruled, something stronger had taken root. Hope.